So today we're talking about the local community's response to victims of the North Bay fires. And I'm joined here by three guests, Margaret Winters from Atherton, Barbara Wood from our sister publication, the Almanac, and Ken Cunningham from Palo Alto Animal Services. And they all volunteered in various capacities during the fire. Ken, let's start with you. I understand that you were one of the first people, or the first person from an outside agency to assist with the Sonoma Animal Services. Tell us about your experience, like what prompted you to get up there so quickly?
Well, I worked the Oakland fire back, I believe it was 91, and I knew how bad it was going to get quickly. I attempted to call Sonoma Animal Services on the phone, and everything was down. They had no power, no phones, anything. I got a hold of Sonoma a county SPCA, and they were fortunate enough to have their power and everything. So I mentioned that I was willing to come up there and help, and they were very grateful. They did, and they were down to their last bag of dog food that they were handing out. So I loaded up my truck to the gills, and the next morning, very first thing in the morning, I was right up there. We unloaded the vehicle at the SPCA, and then I drove over to Animal Services and just showed up cold. Walked in and said, "I'm here," and they just about hugged me. And we went in there and we just rolled up our sleeves and got to work.
What kinds of things were you doing when you were up there?
The first first day, we were doing a number of things. We were transferring animals from the emergency vet. We were patrolling, responding to calls for service, responding to animals that have been injured, a lot of cats that have been singed that we went out and rescued, brought in. And the preponderance of our day was spent checking on animals, going up to the houses that were, and we started, right from the first day, they started to develop a list of addresses where people had to leave their animals behind. So we went up there and we brought food, water, hay, grain, fish food.
Did you see, I thought I had read that you said you put food out, but you felt like you were just feeding the crows. I mean,
there were a number of addresses we went to where the people really had no idea the status of their house. And we went out there. Pacific Heights neighborhood was that was almost the epicenter of Santa Rosa proper. And I mean, there was nothing standing. I mean, there was just nothing but gray ash and rock and steel. And we'd go out there and we'd look at the house and just like no one survived this area. But we put the food and water down anyway, being, eternally hopeful. And probably more of a memorial than anything else. You'd see different houses we went back to, you'd see the food and the water. And plenty of crows were getting fat. There was a lot of crows that were coming down eating the food, and probably other wildlife, raccoons, that kind of thing. And so we did that. To access homes, we climbed fences, we climbed trees, we go through windows. It was a lot of improvising. We fed, everything from, koi to cattle and everything in between. I think the only one that really didn't appreciate us were a couple llamas. But, but they don't appreciate anyone. The llamas, being nice or something wrong. But
so what was the scene like when you left compared to when you first got there? Was there a noticeable difference?
Absolutely. When I first got there, there was, it was like the color palette of the community was drained. There was, everything was gray. The visibility was probably about no more than a quarter of a mile, and it would look like fog, and everything was ashen. It set the mood. You were depressed, you walked in there, and you'd see people driving by, with all their possessions in their cars, just with this kind of shock-like look on their face. But when they saw us and when they drove by, despite how the positions they were in, they always gave us a thumbs up or a peace sign or something. So as time went on, communications became better. Initially, there was fire still in spotty areas. All the gas lines were still active, so all the neighborhoods still had the gas lines exposed and fire, and then as time went on, they shut all that down, and then they saw the PG&E crews in there. That did just an amazing job, hundreds and hundreds of them, and in the police department, the fire department, and then it became, the sun came out, the wind changed, and people became, the Santa Rosa residents were unbelievable. I mean, I can't think of anyone that has anything negative to say about the residents. They were just so grateful, they almost cared more about the people that came to respond and help than they did themselves. And these are people that lost everything. We had volunteers at the animal services that had lost everything, and they were there helping. And every time you went to a police, check spot, because we couldn't, there's a lot of places that they couldn't let people in, they would look like little mini 7-Elevens. There were stacks of water, stacks of food, and it was just, I think I gained like 5 pounds while I was there. but it was, but there was still a lot of sadness. Yeah. One thing I remember is one of the emergency vets there, I walk in, I was going to pick up some animals, and they had the surgery suite. They had 3 huge dogs lined up, ready to go, on the surgery tables, and this doctor is in the middle of working on one, and he's I guess debriding his face. He had some burns on his face, and people are running around all over the place. And the doctor, turns to me and goes, "Hey, you need anything? You want some coffee? You want some food? They go around the corner and make sure." And that was just the tone for everybody everywhere, and it was truly, they truly set the tone.
Well, you were also over there, but you were working in a shelter. Were your experience similar, or what was it like?
They were. I was working in a Red Cross shelter at the Finley Community Center. So in Santa Rosa, so the people had set it up immediately after the disaster. And the one thing that struck me was I ran into a number of people who had been devastated by the fire who were there volunteering. I was doing public affairs for the Red Cross, so I was kind of collecting stories from people. And one of the first people I talked to was a woman I met. She was in folding some of the donated clothes and putting them in piles so people who needed them could come and find what they needed easily. And I started talking to her, and it turned out that she had recently was going through a divorce. So she had taken what she said were just the most precious things to her and moved into a room in a friend's house. And then the night of the fire, she was house sitting for someone else. So, and her friend's home was completely leveled. So she lost everything except a few things she had in a suitcase to house it. And there she was volunteering. And I said, "Why did you decide to do this?" And she said, "Because it took my mind off of things, and because it made me feel better to help somebody who is maybe worse off than I did." The head of the Salvation Army, who was there helping us provide food and stuff, he had been evacuated from his home and hadn't been back there. I think his home was still okay, but he was working tirelessly. And I spent the night in a little room that was over at the aquatic center where their pool is and stuff. And so they had a little room set up for Red Cross volunteers. And the young man who let me in was staying all night there so that they could let the Red Cross people in and out. And I started talking to him, and he too had lost everything. And he told me that he had worked the first 72 hours nonstop. And I guess they set up some cots there or something so some of them could take naps. But, everybody who wasn't affected pitched in, and those who were affected also pitched in as soon as they could. It really is kind of inspiring.
I thought you had said that when you first got there, you were expecting people to be really a somber mood, but that people actually, despite their circumstances, it was actually people were uplifting toward one another, helping out, and the mood was different than what you thought. People were like that. They were, I think, kind of trying to find, little moments of happiness and stuff. One of the most amazing things that I saw there was, I think, on Sunday night, so some of them had been there nearly a week then, these wonderful musicians had volunteered to come and play in the shelter. And so there was an interior courtyard. So they were in the interior courtyard playing this wonderful kind of classic rock folk music, the kind of songs that everyone knows the words to. And I was sitting off on the side, kind of trying to write some stuff. And the shelter residents, the evacuees, or some of them people who lost their homes, were out there singing along with musicians, and some of them started dancing. And then I looked up and the stars had come out. And you hadn't been able to see stars in Santa Rosa for a while. And it was just kind of like this totally uplifting thing that people were finding, hope and joy in the middle of everything that had happened to them. And the musicians stayed and played, I think, until they totally ran out of energy. But it was a really wonderful thing, in the middle of, what could have been very sad and somber. Now you were volunteering in Redwood City, so you got to see the local response.
Yes.
And how people kind of mobilized over here. So tell us how you volunteered and the types of things that you saw.
Okay. So we learned about what was going on very early Monday morning when my husband's assistant called us at 4 a.m. to tell us that she was being evacuated from Santa Rosa. Very tearfully. And for the next couple days, I was consumed by, what can we do? And finally I saw a posting on Facebook where there was a fellow who was going to drive around to different points in the Bay Area and collect food and drive it up to the Redwood Empire Food Bank in Santa Rosa. So I thought, oh, great. So I contacted him and he said, well, if you want me to come to your house, just commit to 5 grocery bagfuls of food. So I said, oh, okay, fine. And I started going around and collecting stuff in our house. And then I thought, how can I make this a little bit bigger? So I called Costco and talked to one of the managers there and asked if they could possibly help contribute. And they said, well, they couldn't do anything as a local store because their corporate office does stuff monetarily with bigger organizations. They could put out a bin. And this is one of those big bins that you see pumpkins in. It's about this high and about this big around. And they said, great. Well, within the hour, they had that out. And they started collecting. And people would go into Costco and buy their things. And then on the way out, they would put, a box of package of tinned food or nappies or clothes or whatever in that bin from Costco. So in the meantime, I was talking to a friend who's involved with the Kiwanis group in Redwood City, and she told me that there is a group working over at Seaport Storage. So I went over there, and what happened there was that a fellow named Justin, who works for Dave Brett at Seaport Storage, who owns that company, he had the idea to get together a collection point and to send things up to Santa Rosa. So starting on Tuesday, so just a couple days after this thing started, he started telling people, bring things over, and Justin himself drove 3 three times, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, up to Santa Rosa with a full truck from Seaport Storage. And all of the employees at Seaport Storage were pressed into service. And as the time went, as the days went on, by the time I got there on Friday, there were bags of different items. And finally we decided, it's time to split up the toiletries into toothbrushes here and toothpaste there and shampoo over here, that kind of stuff. And then we had, a big pile of food, and there was a big
From the photos, it looked like the
mountains.
mountains.
It was mountains of stuff.
The same thing with the animal donations.
Yeah.
Well, and there was a similar mountain of dog and cat food. We had so much dog and cat food that we couldn't handle it all, that we ended up, so then there were a group of realtors that came over from Allen Pinnell, and they all worked very tirelessly. And then I guess it was on Sunday, one of the gals and her husband took 2 truckfuls full of the pet food down to Santa Clara because there was a problem down there. And they were trying to,
When you were there, were
mobilize.
there just like a constant, influx of people,
Yes.
cars showing up and
Well, I would say there were, so we had maybe 15 at a time, 10 to 15 people working there at a time. And this is, for 2 or 3 hours, and then they would leave and somebody else would come. And somebody would show up and just say, well, just tell me what to do.
Didn't you say someone showed up with a truck and just said, okay, load the stuff on my truck, I'll drive it over?
Yes, yeah. When I arrived, there was a fellow named AJ who had a big old truck. He had just arrived back from helping people in Las Vegas, and he came and showed up. He had this big flatbed in the back, and there was a mountain of drinking water in pallets, and he loaded that whole, with the help of several other guys. They loaded the back pallet, or the back flatbed full of water to keep it heavy. And then we piled other things on top and made a mountain and put tarps over that, put all kinds of different things. We had a box of toothbrushes and a box of this and a box of that. And he took that up. That was Friday night. And it was closed in Santa Rosa that night, so he spent the night. And then the next morning, the people up there unloaded the truck, and he came back and he helped more. Meanwhile, we had we were expecting some trucks from Santa Rosa, but they weren't able to get out. So again, the guy at Seaport Storage was very generous, and he, out of his own pocket, he paid for a couple of U-Haul trucks. And these are the big ones with the door in the back.
Oh, yeah.
And we filled those to the brim. When we couldn't, we would put water in the front, and then we would put something in the middle, and then, and then toss pillows up to fill up the spaces. You cannot believe how much they got into those trucks. So much so that one time they took a truck up to Cloverdale, and the person on the other end opened the truck and just started weeping. He was just so overcome with emotion after seeing all the things that people had sent. It was so wonderful to see people working together. And these are people who most of us didn't know each other. Most of us, we just, oh, hi, I'm Margaret. Oh, hi, I'm Elaine. And we had, one gal came from Alameda. I had a couple friends from San Mateo who came down to help. I put a posting on Facebook, and they came, put us to work. What can we do?
I always think it's amazing because I know everyone has good intentions and they want to help, but then to go from just maybe donating the goods to actually donating your time, or for you, you jump in a truck and you just speed over there. I mean, like, what prompted you to go from just donating some bags of food to actually getting so involved?
I just felt like I wanted to do something. And I was feeling very frustrated about the fact that there didn't seem to be any kind of an effort in our area to do anything. And knowing that my husband's assistant was, she was suffering. She didn't lose her home, thank goodness. But she was evacuated for a few days. And that just made me want to do something.
Yeah.
And I wanted to mention also that that we were able to get 5 huge bins from Costco, which my son picked up in our station wagon, and completely from floor to ceiling.
So you were just expecting one bin, and then
We
there were
had 5
bins. Wow.
Yes, 5
Wow.
bins of all kinds of non-perishable foods. And people amazed me at the way that they thought about what people needed. You know, one woman went with her children to Target and bought, you know, a big bag full of toiletries, including deodorant and toothbrushes and little kids' clothes and diapers, and, you know, thinking about what people would need. You know, it's not an easy way to donate. The easy way to donate is to write a check.
Yeah.
And this is the good way to donate. And, you know, at this point now, they do need money. They've been overwhelmed with the amount of, you know, supplies that have been sent up. And there was I was told there was another center in Alameda where they were getting together things. But Monday morning, when we were finishing up and sending the last truck up, we had there was a lady who came up from San Jose, excuse me, with three other moms, and their minivans were filled with goods which the Girl Scouts had put together. And that was really nice to see.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a lot of people wanting to do something to help, and driving in and just doing, you know, intending to just bring things.
Yeah.
And then a lot of them stayed. A lot of them said, well, let me help you. What can I do to help? Can I sort? Can I whatever? And
You know, along the lines of people thinking about what people really need up there. I was at the Sonoma Center, the Sonoma Fairgrounds, and there was, for lack of a better word, I'll call it Fire City, where all the tents were, all the engines were, fire engines were there, and just you go through and you see superheroes. I mean, they're rock stars. They were the guys that were up there. I mean, they were, you know, it was like, if this was a concert, they were the guys on stage, the firefighters, because they, you know, the ones putting an end to this catastrophe.
Yes.
And spending 3 days at a time up there. So they come back and there was it almost looked like a street fair kind of setup with these awnings and stuff, and they were getting massages. There's
That's
Reiki
always
massage, and the line was like half a mile long, and these firefighters they were just working on it, and I thought that was just amazing. On the last day I was going up there, my daughter had been bugging me about going with me, so and she's another one that, well, you know, something happens, she's there. If you're pulled over the side of the road or there's an accident, she's going to be the first one to jump in there. But so she rented a truck and filled it up and followed me up there, and then she rode with me. And one of the things she did for the firefighters is she bought a bunch of compression shirts like Nike and those shirts, and she bought a bunch of them just as a gift for them.
that's nice.
And they were it kind of like broke the tension. It was, she'd go, you know, truck to truck to truck and just hand them out. And they were like, you don't need to do this. And they go, no, we're just, guys, this is just a gift just for you. It doesn't mean you need it. It doesn't mean we think you smell. It doesn't, you know, this is just a gift just for, you know, hey, thanks. And that's the kind of stuff those guys wear, and they just loved it, so.
Yeah.
Very sweet.
We had people bring bouquets of flowers to the shelter so that they could be on all the tables in the cafeteria. One day they arranged to stream the football games, and I guess somebody in the Salvation Army went on social media and asked for 49ers, you know, plates, cups, etc. And so they were able to have a big tailgate party for the residents of the shelter. And even, I'm not sure where they got them, had 49er shirts so that every resident could have a shirt. So, you know, that there were some real thoughtful things going on by people to make people just feel better about what they'd been through. But, you know, I think that one reason why we were all struck so much by this is that, honestly, especially in Northern California, we are blessed to have very few disasters. You know, I've been to parts of the country where they have, Mississippi and Florida come to mind, where they have hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, you know, and then they'll say, "You live in California? Aren't you afraid of the earthquakes?" Well, we all have this little idea in the back of our mind that someday there is going to be an earthquake, and you know, and maybe we should, you know, have our supplies ready. But I don't think that any of us ever thought that Northern California would be overcome by wildfires. And it really struck me when I first heard that some good friends of ours from Woodside, who I'd known from the time our children went to the cooperative nursery school together, had moved to Mendocino County about 5 years ago. Were living in a log cabin off the grid that they built with their own hands. The most wonderful people. And apparently they got a call at around 3 a.m. or in the middle of the night from a friend who said, "Get out of there, the fire is coming up your hill." So it was Dan and Vicky Pardini. They grabbed their grandchildren and threw them in the car. And they were going to try to grab a few more things, and their propane tank blew up. So they left with nothing, and it was completely leveled. I heard about that, and then I walked outside, and this local area was covered in ash. But that really brings it home to you. You can only imagine if we have ash raining down and all of this smoke, what it must be like in Santa Rosa, where we've probably all been, and in the wine country where we've all been. The people that we actually know are affected by this disaster, and the scale of it is devastating. It's not just, you know, one home. It's whole entire neighborhoods, suburban neighborhoods, you know. I mean, and here I am in Woodside, and a friend of mine in Portola Valley posted on Facebook, she said, "It's so smoky here, and there's helicopters going overhead. How do I know we're not on fire?" And someone else posted for her a map that you could look exactly where the fire was. But we live in an area where we're surrounded by trees and dead grass, and it's really so we also, I think, have a direct connection because we know it could have been us.
Yeah, I think that one reason why the residents were able to be in the position they were and have the mindset they were is because of the confidence they had in the first responders that came there. I mean, that from my perspective, the Sonoma Animal Care and Control, that they had it wired. You would act like you acted like they did this every day. They just, I mean, everything was, you know, there was a few problems, glitches here and there. It was a disaster. But for the most part, they rocked. They were a really good crew, and they just, you know, improvised and went with what needed to be done, and it all got done. And that was the same thing with all the agencies. You know, the Red Cross, the PG&E, the you know, of course, the firefighters and the police department. I think it all just gelled so well that I think that really, you know, allowed the Santa Rosa people to let down just a little bit. I'm sure in the future there's going to be all kinds, I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist, but there's going to be all kinds of issues they're going to be dealing with because, you know, it's all over and now it's, you know, it's a new life and we have to move on.
It's not all over.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm just saying when it is over, they're thinking it's all over. Okay, now
the
we have to move
emergency
on
is
with
ended.
it.
Yeah. That is actually a problem in a lot of cases after a disaster. It's what the Red Cross calls the recovery phase. And one problem is that everyone forgets. You know, I was there Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. By Monday, when the media were showing up, they were saying, well, everyone's going home now, right? But I checked with the Red Cross, and so there were 110 people in this shelter on Sunday night, and there were 90 people there on Tuesday night.
Are you going back up, or?
I'm not sure. If I could find someone to do my job for 3 weeks, I'd go to Puerto Rico, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I don't know if I'll be able to go up to back to Santa Rosa or not, but I do know that
But there are still Red Cross workers up there, is what you're saying.
Actually, yeah, there are
Okay.
a lot of Red Cross workers there, and there are a lot of Red Cross workers who are trained in the recovery phase, and we will have people come and let us know what their needs are and try to make sure that they are taken care of. And that is like way sort of less sexy than housing people who have been evacuated. But you know, the Red Cross might not physically provide somebody with a new home, but they're going to work with all the other agencies and try to make sure that these people find a place where they can find a new home, where they can, you know, people are going to need to be replacing their furniture. You know, there are so many needs someone has after a fire, but the Red Cross, you know, I don't think most people realize this, but the main thing that the Red Cross does is actually respond to local house and apartment fires. And so, you know, every day of the week we respond to those fires. So we do this on a really small scale. And this is the same type of recovery, but it's just massively larger.
Okay, so I guess that wraps it up for today's Behind the Headlines. I don't know, is there anything else you want to add?
I just wanted to add, and you hear this all the time, and it almost sounds like a cliche, but be prepared. From the animal perspective, I know it's the animals freak and they scare so easily. In the event of an emergency, try and stay as calm as you can, and gather the things that you need for your animal along with everything else. Be prepared. Have a bag with you. Have some food and some, you know, obviously water, and just go from there.
Okay.
I would just say I was just very impressed by how people came together in the face of something like this happening and worked so well side by side. And it really made me feel a lot better about things these days and how everybody can make a difference.
And I think what Ken said is great. We do need to be prepared. And I actually vowed when I was there that when I got home, I was going to put together a bag and put it by the door, because this really brought home to us that none of us know when we might need to run out of our house with very little notice.
I agree.
Have a game plan.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ken, Margaret, Barbara. Thanks for sharing your stories and joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this.
This was great. So join us next week. If you enjoyed what you heard, subscribe below or go to paloaltoonline.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram.